Welcome, everyone. My name is Eustachian, and today we are here with a wonderful guest on Who's at the Table. For those of you who have been following me and following the show, thank you so much for allowing these awesome women veterans to come and be interviewed and tell their wonderful stories. We deserve to be at the table. We have awesome careers and we are out here go-getters and CEOs, and what we do can be very beneficial to those boardroom discussions. And so that was the reason why I created Who's at the Table. And as a result of that, I have found some miraculous women out here who are doing great work, and none other than our guest today. She fits that bill. And today we have a wonderful guest. Her name is Vanessa Mahan, and I'm gonna allow Vanessa to introduce herself, and we're gonna get into her story and why she deserves to be here at the table. Vanessa, tell us about you.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm so happy to be here, as all your guests are, I'm sure. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in the Midwest. I'm an Indiana girl.
Okay.
I grew up with my parents. They were divorced pretty much since I was born. So I had that in my family dynamic. So not the happy divorce kind of people. But, you know, it leads to, I think, stronger things down the line. When I got older, I really had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. Mm-hmm. But I decided to apply for a ROTC scholarship. I got accepted to Purdue University. Nice. I majored in meteorology. I decided, that I wanted to become an Air Force officer. And so I did that. I got selected to fly as a weapons systems officer in the F-15E. And then later I got selected to become an electronic warfare officer in the EA-6B Prowler. So I got to fly with the Navy. So as a captain in the Air Force, when you're on a carrier and you answer the phone, Captain Mahan, it's kind of funny because they think you're an 06 and don't tell anybody. But I ended up marrying a Navy guy that I met in flight school. We have 2 kids. We recently moved to Florida. And my life just took so many adventures where I left active duty. I joined the reserves. I started speaking with a group called Athena's Voice. I opened my own business called Siren Strong, which is my call sign, Siren. And yeah, I am truly blessed to have all these life experiences, and I can't wait to share a little bit more with you.
Absolutely. So one good thing that we have in common is we both were in the Air Force. So that's pretty cool, right? But also, I'm not sure if you saw Heather Penny's show, but I revealed on that show that I actually worked on F-15s as a logistics officer. So my first duty station was at Hampton Roads, Virginia, at Langley Air Force Base. And awesome. That was my first job, and I thought it was the coolest thing, seeing the female pilots in their flight uniform, and to work on those F-15s and to see you guys go out there and fly those F-15s. I just thought that was so badass, if you will. And so it's good to know that you did some similar work, and to know that you chose the Air Force. But let's get a little deeper into why did you choose the military? I mean, with your credentials that you just talked about, you probably could have gone and done anything you wanted to do, but why did you choose the Air Force?
Well, to be honest, my dad, who was an Army guy, he was always the one plugging the Air Force. Like, if you're going to join the military, join the Air Force. And so I feel like it was subliminal messaging too, because I would be eating breakfast and then he'd walk by and say, join the Air Force. I'm like, what? So, okay, it wasn't that obvious, but when it came time, he's like, what do you think about joining the Air Force? And he flew a lot. We flew civilian aircraft with him. And, as a teen, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. Yeah, sure. I'm like, will they give me a scholarship? And, they did, which was awesome. So that was one of the reasons that I personally applied, because I wanted to go away to school, and the only way to pay for that was to get a scholarship. So I'm like, well, the Air Force recruiter came to my high school. I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a try. And I did this all behind my mom's back because she was not really on board with me joining the military. My sister wanted to be an Army vet, and my mom said, hard no. And so being the younger sneaky child, I went behind my mom's back. I had my dad take me to the scholarship interview at Notre Dame, and it turns out that I got a 4-year scholarship to Purdue. So I remember, you know, going in my first day, like I don't really know anything about the military except, you know, my dad's medals on the office wall or watching old war movies, but I couldn't tell you the difference between any planes. I had no idea the rank. So I join and I walk in ROTC. I'm like, what's this uniform stuff about? Okay. But I fell in love with it. I loved every minute of it. And I was not the kind of person that was super athletic in high school. Like I did track. That was about the most coordinated sport that I would be decent at. But other than that, I wasn't very physically strong or anything. And I found a love for push-ups and sit-ups. I, you know, loved the drill, the leadership opportunities. I just ate it up.
Yeah.
So I knew at that point that I had found my people, which was huge. Because as a teen and a younger kid, I don't think that it was hard for me to find my tribe. And all those ROTC cadets, I felt like I found my tribe. And that just ingrained a love of the Air Force deep within. And our ROTC unit was so good. We did so much with POW and MIA stuff and veterans and volunteering. And it was, again, like, I was made to do this. So I will say though that, you know, when I did select my career field, which was going to, at the time they called it Joint Strike Undergraduate Navigator Training, that's when my world blew up. And I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. Like it didn't meld, and it wasn't as, I don't want to say easy, but it didn't come to me like ROTC, like everything in ROTC did as a cadet. So I struggled. And I went from being like a distinguished graduate #1 to feeling like, did I make the right choice?
Wow.
Like I wasn't sure academically, like it wasn't sinking in the way I had hoped it would, or the way that I perceived other people were getting it. So I felt like I was struggling so much compared to everyone else, which now that I look on it, back on it, it really wasn't. But it's that internal negative self-talk that goes on when we feel like maybe we don't belong there, we're not good enough. On top of that, I struggled with a medical condition that the doctors termed Eustachian tube dysfunction. So on random ascents and descents, it was like somebody took a plunger over my ears and pulled. And it was so painful that I'd be sitting in the back of the T6 like this, like rocking with my hands over my ears. And so as you can imagine, it's hard to concentrate when you're in that much pain.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you overcome that though? And when were you diagnosed? Were you diagnosed in the military that you had this disorder?
I was. And so they did all these treatments. They did, I had every kind of allergy test done. I was put on medication for a very long time. I even had surgery to try to fix it. And they basically came up with that it was just not gonna ever be fixed. So I did go back to flying when I could prove that I could Valsalva. And then I just kind of pushed through, and I'm like, I'm not going to not do this. Which at the time, this was back in like 2004. So, you know, at the time, the military was overmanned and they were letting people get out without any payback.
Yeah.
So I could have easily been like, nah, I don't want to do this. But I was in college when 9/11 happened. And it was then that I decided that I wanted to fly in combat. And I wanted to do it now. But there's no such thing as now when you have to finish school and you have to finish training. So it was that pushed me through, that gave me the grit to push through those barriers, to not take that easy out. I just felt this deep calling to serve, and I was not willing to give that up. And oh, by the way, this is also the time when the Air Force Academy was having their big controversy about sexual assaults. And so I would hear people in the squadrons talking like, oh, those girls are just making that stuff up. They're just trying to get attention. And so that put even more pressure on me, because I'm like, oh my God, I can't let people like even think that about me, that I'm, it was just a dark time in the Air Force's history, specifically because I heard all these rumors about that. Yeah. And I was so worried that I would become one of those rumors. You would hear all things about students and instructors hooking up, and just, I mean, it was crazy. I'm like, am I back in high school? Like, what is going on? Yeah. And on top of that, actually did have a sexual assault from an instructor when I was in flight school that just destroyed me. And, think of it this way, like when you find your tribe and somebody from that tribe violates you, it crushes your very soul. And out of all the obstacles, all the, academic stuff, the pain in my head, that was probably the worst thing that could have happened to me there. And, it was really hard to recover from. I felt so much shame. Like, is this my fault? I remember calling a friend after it happened, and her response was, "Oh, was he a good kisser?" And I was like, what? Huh? I was so shocked. And then I called the guy I was dating at the time, and his response was, "Well, what were you wearing?" And I was like, okay. And I just crumpled and sunk into the darkest place. And it took everything in my soul to be able to get back in that airplane and keep flying. It was hard. It was so hard. I eventually graduated from that squadron and moved on to the next one. And I was like, okay, I'm getting closer to getting my wings. I'm getting closer to graduating. I'm getting closer to flying in combat. Let's do this. Yeah. And we were all hanging out at the end of a workday. I believe we had just selected our airplanes, and I got that F-15E. Nice. I selected it. Number one choice. I got it. Awesome. I felt so good. Yeah. I'm like, all right, I'm doing this. Yeah. And if you remember the flight suit, right, it's got all these pockets. Yeah. And the pockets are awesome. Yeah. But the zippers tend to stick out sometimes, and there's zippers that go down across your chest that may poke out and look like something else if you catch my drift. Yeah, I catch your drift. And one of the instructors looks at me. I'll pause right there. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. We'll edit that. Okay. Yeah, we'll edit that. So, one of the instructors looks at me, flicks that zipper, which is right by my bosom, and says, "Speed brakes out." And I was like, so I kept a very stoic face. I could not believe that he had just done that. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, that is so close to my lady bits. That is like on top of my lady bits. I'm like, what are you doing? And I remember getting into my car that night, holding onto the steering wheel and just like, no more. I'm like, never again. This is not okay. Nope. I'm not going to let this happen. I'm not going to let anyone get away with this crap. And so I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't let that happen to me anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, fast forward, I get my wings. I have other events. I remember being in the O Club and another guy my age walks by and like grabs my ass. And I'm like, aha, now, no. And so I go after him. I take my 3,000 PSI finger, poke it in his chest and say, do you have a problem? And he's like, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. And I'm like, yes. And that little bit empowered me. I was like, oh yeah, you stand down, like cower, because you know what you did was inappropriate. And so every little thing like that happened, and it wasn't very often. And just like Lucky Penny mentioned, like most of my bros were awesome and I love them. They were my brothers, mm-hmm. and it was amazing. But every once in a while, somebody would cross my line, and I would sometimes, like, depending on who it was, like, okay, I can't let this happen. Mm-hmm. I got to stop it. So I'd approach that person and squash it. Yeah. I remember one guy saying, like, this is when texting first came out, said something really appropriate over text to a small group of guys in my squadron, including myself. And I remember having to go up to him the next day. He was in the briefing room and I was standing outside the briefing room knowing that I had to talk to him. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. Okay. So I gave myself that pep talk, right? Mm-hmm. 'Cause it's hard to stand up to your friends. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, look, why did you say this? And then he gives his excuse. I'm like, do you think that's okay if somebody said that about your wife, your mother, your sister, your daughter? He's like, no, I'll fix it. I'll make it better. You're right. And I'm like, okay, thank you. But just those things happening, it was something I guess I was not prepared for at all, because like I said, I had such amazing people in ROTC. I never experienced any of that. Yeah. And I wasn't expecting any of that. Yeah. And so this bubble of protection that I put around myself after the speed brake zipper incident, and like every time it happened after me, I eventually was able to spread it around other women too. Yeah. So, you know, being in the military, you're a minority. Yeah. Like there's not many women. So when a woman shows up, especially to a fighter squadron or logistics or whatever, you know, they probably know you're coming and they know about you, or they know about you, yeah, before you actually show up. And so I would start hearing rumors about other chicks that were coming to base, and there would be some like, oh, chatty chat, inappropriate things, like, you know, and I would take it upon myself to be like, oh, how do you know that? Were you there? Did you see it happen? Yeah. And they would take a step back. But at least, even if I didn't know them, at least I would, like, it was my hope that by sticking up for them or giving them the benefit of the doubt, whether it's true or not, who cares? Like, nobody says it when the guys do it, but just to have the guys who are saying those things kind of take a step back and think about what they're saying, right? Yeah. Because, you know, in the beginning when I did hear that stuff, I would, you know, shake my head in disgust, like, oh, here we go again. Yeah. But it was not until, you know, it happened to me several times that I got brave enough to stand up to my bros, you know, or anybody, and just say, no more. Maybe you should stop, or maybe it doesn't apply. Yeah. So
and I appreciate your bravery by telling your story, and that's the purpose
for being here at the table is because a lot of people would not have known your story had you not revealed it here to us today. So I appreciate you disclosing that. And I feel you when you're talking about, you know, having someone violate you and having that sense of, you know, what did I do? You know, was it something that I was wearing, you know, and just to know that women have to even go through that kind of, you know, figuring it out. Was it me? When in essence, it's really not us, right? And for that to happen to you back in the 2000s, we're here in 2020 and women veterans are still faced with this issue. And I have a niece that is in the Navy right now, and I have a few friends whose daughters are in the military right now. And that's the one thing that we talk about a lot is how do we arm our young girls with the tools and with how to have that fortitude to say to a guy, don't you do that crap, don't you touch me in that way. And God forbid if they have to tell on somebody and report it, giving them the strength to know that they are not supposed to be violated and standing up for themselves. And for you to go about it the way that you did, I applaud you, because I'm telling you, in this advocacy work that we do with AMVET, there are so many women who are still out here suffering from military sexual trauma. They didn't talk and confess to someone that it happened. They didn't go and report that their officer or their supervisor assaulted them. They are dealing with post-traumatic stress still to this day because of it. So how do you, or what did you do in order to arm yourself to be able to stand up when that second happened, when that third happened? What was it about you that changed in order for you to stand up for yourself, unlike the first incident?
So I will try to answer that. The dog was barking, so
It's okay.
I didn't hear the whole question. But I will say that I didn't report it when it happened to me. And in fact, I only started talking about this maybe 3 years ago. So I had kept it buried. And I think maybe, you know, the two people that I told the first time that I got not the feedback I was looking for, I guess, that kind of just shut me up. And so I am guilty of keeping that inside because I was so worried about somebody being like, oh, she just wants attention, or she's just trying to pass, or whatever, right? Like I just wanted to fly under the radar. That was my whole thing. Like just blend in.
Want to
just
fly under the radar, but you're still a woman, and this is where the empowerment piece comes. That though we as women, you know, we come into this military and we feel like we gotta be just as good as these guys, and we don't want to be the one causing problems. But when we're violated, I mean, you're not talking about somebody, you know, hitting you, or maybe they're roughing you up a little bit, or maybe they're calling you out by your name. You're talking someone physically violating you, right? And when that happens, we have to be able to tell, you know, these warriors, these female warriors out here that, you know, I don't care who you tell a third person, tell a fourth person, tell a fifth person, till someone coddles you with what you need, so you feel like it's not you. You feel like it wasn't my fault. And so I'm sorry that those two people that you confessed to did not give you that, you know, that comfort that you deserve and give you that confidence in saying, I need to go and tell somebody this, because you had to carry this around. And for
years,
now,
like 15 years.
15 years, I'm just like dumbfounded that, you know, of the effects this has had on you as a person, on the effects that it's had on your life and your career and your transition. And now this is a blemish in your military career because of that. And so, man, what do you think if you had those two encounters afterwards and they gave you that confidence to say, hey, Vanessa, I'm gonna walk with you to your commander's office. I'm walking to you to the police department. I'm walking with you to that ER. do you think that would have changed how you approach that incident?
Those are really good questions. I don't know if I've ever really thought about it like that. Like would how would have things been different? Maybe I wouldn't. I mean, for sure, for sure it would have been super hard, right? Because again, I'm going against the flying under the radar, like just trying to get done and survive flight school. But I think one of the biggest things is I wouldn't have felt shame. I could have confronted him and like just, you know, probably gotten closure or forgiveness sooner, right? And that's really the biggest thing. Like whether he regrets it or if he even remembers, right? I don't know. But at least for myself, given myself forgiveness sooner, and that probably would have made things a lot easier on me personally to know that I wasn't alone or suffering alone. And let me backtrack just a little bit. I will say to on the positive of the guy I was dating at the time, he did call me later and he did apologize, and he said that he was sorry and that was the wrong thing to say. He was angry and he said the wrong thing, and you know, he's like, whatever I can do to help you, I will help you, which was really, really big for him to do that and admit that he was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult conversation. I mean, number one, you're dating him, and I'm sure he cares about you, right? And sometimes when we don't know how to answer a question, we say something that's completely off the wall, and you're just like, I can't believe I just disclosed this to you. You said that, you know, and kudos to him for coming back and apologizing. But it is a difficult conversation to have with anybody. And I think it's that shame piece. It's that who's going to believe me piece. It's going to be like, you know, did I warrant it? You know, what did I do to cause this? It's all of that stuff that you have to, you're going over and over in your head about that. If somebody is not in those shoes with you, it'll be hard for you to disclose that and get that comfort you need immediately. So I'm happy to know that he did apologize. But let me tell you, Vanessa, I mean, there's so many women out here, I'm telling you, that have that shame, don't know where to go. I remember when I, you know, was at Langley Air Force Base, and, you know, again, I'm a female working with a lot of guys. And one of the things that I thought was horrible for them to do is they will always see the RIP. You know, back in the day, we would get a RIP, which is a little list of everybody coming in. And it will designate where the troops are going, which departments they're going in. And so the men will look at the list and they will see how many females is coming to this particular department. And then they will scrutinize the name, and then they will say, oh, her name is Sharisa, or her name is Karen. And then they'll figure out, is she Black or is she white? I'm just like, well, what difference does that make? And then they will start immediately saying, you know, with somebody with the name Jackson, you know, she's going to be a little feisty one. Oh, you know, maybe that's a good one for you, as in they're picking the different guys for us. Like, you know, we're coming in like bait or something. Right. And that annoyed the crap out of me, because I'm sure they did it before I came, because this seemed to be their standard that they did. And then to see them do it after other women came after me, I was like, what are you guys thinking? Why do you guys find it necessary to look at the list to see if she's female, to see if she's Black, to see if she's white? What difference does it make? But that's that preying mentality that was already happening that people never talked about. Right. And people never checked these guys on it. Someone should have checked those guys on and say, stop that. That's not, you know, something, the behavior that we want to have in this department. But because no one checked them, they continue to do it. And as a result, several of those non-commissioned officers were busted for sexual assault, and they went to Leavenworth, which is where they deserve to freaking go, because it's been a history of them doing this type of activity until it took young women going before the commander and saying, this is what's happened to me. And I have a paper trail of this guy preying on me, wanting me, doing these things to me in order for us to finally send these guys to Leavenworth. So it happens, but no one is willing to have that conversation, Vanessa. So how do we convince young women, or just women, period, who've been assaulted, to just have that conversation? And if it doesn't pan out with that first conversation, find a second person or a third person. How do we have that conversation?
Well, I think the conversation has to go with everyone, right? It's not just a women conversation. It's especially important for men to have the conversation. This is one of the reasons that I speak too, because I had decided about 3 years ago and that I wasn't going to be silent anymore. And I think what shifted for me really, and this might be really weird, but I started meditating, and through that I was able to unstress and things started coming out. And that's when I felt compelled to share my story, because through my pain and my journey, I wanted to empower other women to maybe not experience the same thing that I had either. And my slogan for Siren Strong is empower your strong. And that strong can be anything, whether it's, you know, your mom strong or your fitness strong or anything. So I think by having this conversation and more people having this conversation, it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I reached out to some of my old bros and asked them, I'm like, well, you know, what did you think about all this stuff? Or what did you think of me when we were, you know, flying together? And they would say like awesome things. And they're like, why are you asking? And so I told them, and their response was like, I had no idea you went through that. I am so sorry that you went through that. And I realized that more often than not, those guys would have had my back if I had told them.
Yeah.
And that is so important. When I first checked into my fighter squadron, I remember going to see the squadron commander, and he, in his past squadron, they had an MST in their squadron when he was the DO.
Okay.
And so he was hypersensitive about this. And here I come in as the only female after he went through this as the DO, the director of operations. And he's like, all right, let's have a talk. And I'm like, oh, I'm scared. But he was like, if anything ever happens to you, if anybody does anything, I will crush them. And I'm like, where were you when I was in flight school? Yeah. And of course I never told him, but the fact that he came out and said that to me, I'm like, awesome.
Yeah.
And later on, when I was in the Navy, I went and saw the skipper, and we were about to go on the ship for a few weeks during workups for deployment. And there were, I want to say, 2 other younger Navy lieutenants in our squadron. And he's, at this time I'm called Siren. So he's like, Siren, I need you to look out for these ladies. I'm like, you got it, sir. No problem. I got their back. Because at that point I was so empowered in, you know, crushing whatever I saw that I was like,
done with it.
That's a mission that I will gladly accept. Yeah. So I think it's, you know, I think it's come a long way, but there needs to be more real discussion about this topic, and not just teaching women about how to handle it when it happens. We need to talk to everyone about preventative things and sticking up for each other. You know, people go out and they drink, they do stupid things. I get it. I've done stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you there are things that are dumb things that I've done in my past. But that's why we have wingmen.
Yeah.
And that's why we have people that, you know, we need to trust to help us when we're up or about to go down the path that we don't need to go down, or if they see other people or sticking up for people. I think that's how we accomplish it, not the standard, like, here's this computer-based training, or, you know, they've done better things, but still, it still needs to be accomplished.
Yeah, there still needs to be a whole lot of work to be done, right? And that work has to be done because there's so many women out here suffering, right? And the women are suffering because they feel like they are living this lie. They're having to work through this in silence. They're having to deal with the stigma of having to say, yes, this has happened to me. And I know, you know, for me in combat, it was all about being able to serve and show them that I'm not weak, and being able to continue to do a stellar job. And so to not be able to tell and not have that wingman, it's important that we have that person that we can confide in, and we have that person that we're comfortable in saying is our wingman. Don't take that name if you're not going to be my wingman, so I can confide in you. And I think that's a good point, that if we say that's who we're supposed to have, whoever we assign that duty, they have to be willing to know what that means. So if I am having a problem, I need to know you're going to have my back. And not everybody takes it, you know, that responsibility to heart. Because if we had that, I believe a lot of women would feel like, I got a person, a go-to person I can go and talk to. And I don't think a lot of women feel that way. So I think mentorship will help. What do you think about mentorship? Like, you're telling your story, I'm telling you, a lot of women are going to come to you and they're going to want to know, you know, what could I have done? How can I empower other women? And that's because you could be viewed as a mentor. And so do you think a mentorship program would help?
You know what? I believe so. I feel like the more I diversify myself and talk to more people and get involved with different parts of the Air Force, that I'm hearing more and more about programs and that I didn't know existed before. So I think it's all about getting and finding programs and blasting them all over social media or whatever, to have more than enough options for somebody to get help if they need to.
Yeah.
And, you know, it is finding that person that will listen to you. I listened to Portia talk, your very first panel, and hearing her talk about how she went to her mom, and then she went to her dad, went to her sister, like those people that are supposed to have your back.
Yeah.
And they didn't have her back until she found, like, I think it was the VA or the
VA.
Yes. That it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
But I get it. Like, things when people deny your feelings, your emotions, it's hard to not feel like you're alone.
Yeah.
So like, I do totally agree that mentorship is huge, and I don't have all the answers by any means. And I remember my old, that squadron commander saying, when I talked to you, there was a female maintainer who was just awesome. Like, she was shit hot, right? Like, but he was like, okay, you know, you're here, Siren. I want you to, like, take her under your wing and take care of her if she has any problems. And I'm like, sir, I don't know if you want me giving her advice, because my advice would be that if somebody tried anything with her, that she should just punch him in the face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, that's what I was going to say at the time. Like, that's who I was at the time. Like, I will I will probably get a little physical violent with you if you try anything. So probably not a good idea. And that's, you know, how I felt when he was like, just
Yeah.
make sure she's okay. I'm like, okay.
Well, I think people have to take that responsibility for what it's worth. Like when I came in and, you know, you get your RIP, your little announcement that you're coming to a particular base. Well, on the enlisted side, I'm not sure what they did on the officer side. They actually matched you with a sponsor. And so that sponsor's role was to make sure you get acclimated to the base, help you with anything that you need. And I will say every sponsor that I had, they were female sponsors. They were tough cookies. And I mean, I think that's the reason why I think I, you know, kind of unscathed the military without any type of issues or anyone doing harm to me, because they were women that was like, look, if this happens, I want you to come to me. We're going to make sure nothing happens to you. And they took that role personally as if I was on their kid, their cousin, their sister. And I think if that role is a role that people are willing to do and take on that responsibility and help women when they do come, I think, you know, how things happen will change, and there will be a change for the good, where the mental health of those women will be so much better. And so with that being said, let's move into how you've recovered. I mean, you've talked candid and honest, and I mean, my heart sinks for you that you've had to experience this so many times, but how have you recovered from it? And what did you do to recover?
So I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. I am betting those sponsors, which I'm super jealous that you had that, because I never had that. It wasn't until like maybe 4 or 5 years into my career that I started finding other female like chick fighter pilots.
Wow.
And so that, and they sound so passionate because maybe it did happen to them and they were going to do everything in their power to prevent it from happening to you. So that would be awesome to have that kind of mentorship and sponsorship.
Yeah.
I was doing some academy liaison officer a little bit. And every time I would have a female that I was interviewing, I would say, okay, interview's over. I'm going to take off my like interviewee hat and I'm just going to talk to you like a woman right now. You can always say no. Don't let anyone do something to you that you are not okay with. I don't care who they are. If you need help, call me. I will get you help. Someone will believe you. I will believe you. And so that's how I like ended those interviews, because that was part of my healing process. Was if I could give just a little bit of courage to young women, then I was also healing myself. And my kids are running amok right now. Sorry. But that's part of the healing process. Speaking now is part of the healing process. And the thing that has surprised me the most is the more I talk and the more I share this story, the more men that come forward and say that they were a victim. And I shocked. I have a son and a daughter, and I was kind of only worrying about my daughter. But as I'm sharing this, I'm like, oh my goodness, I naively
Have to worry about him too.
I have to worry about him too. And I was so naive thinking that I didn't. And so I'm just on this journey. I want to bring awareness to both men and women that, you know, if you have the power, and even if you feel like you're the weakest person in the world, your voice has power. And don't let any kind of shame or a feeling of weakness or negative self-talk or whatever stop you from sticking up for yourself or for other people. I won't shut up about this. If you want.
Well, I don't want you to, because the world needs you right now. I think people will gravitate towards you. Women will gravitate towards you because sometimes you don't even know that you're connecting to somebody unless they hear your story, which is why it's important for me as a woman advocate to hear women's stories. Our stories need to be heard. Our stories need to be validated and valued. And people need to say, oh my God, I didn't know you were going through that. Well, if you had listened to what I was saying, if you were listening,
Yeah.
you would have heard that I was telling you what pains I was having. And so I think it's very courageous of you to be on this journey, to be able to say, you know, I'm telling my story. I didn't feel comfortable doing it way back yonder, but 3 years, you know, ago, I started telling it, and it's healing me, and it's my way to recover. Because I think when people see a face and you're brave enough to tell your story, that's what people want to see. They don't want to read about it. They want to know, I can see eye to eye what Vanessa is talking about. And it touched my heart and my soul when she speaks. And that's why people are coming forward, because you're willing to be genuine and honest about your story. You're not sugarcoating it. You're telling your story from the heart, and people will want to hear that. And that's how you're going to change the perception, and people wanting to feel empowered to be able to speak up for themselves, is by you telling your story. So bravo to you for telling your story. I know you probably have, you know, a lot of things you got to still go through, you're challenged with. Are you challenged with any other mental health disorder like PTSD, depression, or any of that? Or have you found your way out of that?
So I've never been professionally diagnosed with anything, but I will say that I spent 9 months in Afghanistan supporting OEF, and I was out there flying the F-15E doing close air support. And I had spent so much time out there and had seen so many, definitely not as much as the Army guys on the ground. My brother-in-law was an Army guy on the ground, and you know, he has definitely experienced and seen way worse things than I did. But my own trauma that I experienced out there was that I wasn't able to save everyone. I am by nature a helper. Like, I want to help. I want to make things better. I want to fix things. And I know. And when I couldn't get to where I needed to be fast enough and people died, a little bit of me died too. And I took personal responsibility for that. And, you know, lining up on Disney, which is the main road of Bagram Air Base, and watching those caskets go by and the fallen comrades ceremony was the most crushing experience of my life. Every time we had to go to one, it was almost like, not another one, please, not another one. So I took so much personal responsibility for not saving everyone. So at the end of the 9 months when I came home, I lived by myself. I was married, but I was geobatching, and I had a small 1,300 square foot house that I built in North Carolina. You know, I had a car, I had a dog, and I had food in the fridge. And I just went through this phase of, I don't want any of this. I want to get rid of it all. I lived in a wood box for 9 months. Like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
And it was bizarre. And I felt this guilt for leaving. And again, like, I never talked to anybody about it because it seemed that I was the only one that had those feelings. So I was going to shut my mouth because I didn't want to not fly anymore or be perceived as weak or whatever. And I kept a journal, my war journal, and it literally took me 10 years after that deployment to be able to open it up and read it. Wow. I had tried previous to that, and I'm like, I just can't. Like, I just can't. And it's not that everything I experienced out there was horrible. I did a lot of volunteer work out there. at the hospital, the women's hospital on Bagram. I went outside the wire, delivering backpacks to girls at school. But it was just, I think it was just that feeling of not being able to save everyone, to help everyone, that just was consuming me for the longest time.
But survivor skill is something else. I mean, I think a lot of
Yes.
my friends who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, we were under fire a lot. I mean, 2005, 2006, and 2011 in Kandahar City. And we had the mass casualties. I mean, we were working our little fingers to the bones because we were there during the heightened time, right? And so a lot of nurses and medical staff came back with that survival skill. I mean, the injuries that we saw, those body bags that we had to zip up because we couldn't save anybody. And then the gut wrenching part is when we did come back and we were on our way back to the US, a lot of those on the flights, the C-17 flight back home, were bodies. There were caskets that we had to look at for that long flight back home. So you were constantly reminded of those people that you could not save, right? So a lot of people came back with that survival skill, and I know it well. I mean, there's some of my friends that left nursing because they couldn't take the memories and the thoughts and that survival skill. So how did you press forward through that? Is it the meditation that you're doing now? Is it the nonprofit work that you're doing now? How are you getting past that?
So I think when I initially got back, I did my best to just put it aside and to stay really busy and do my best. Yes. Become a workaholic. I was, about ready to PCS and change duty assignments. And I would do my best not to think about it at all. And because I didn't see anybody else. And the whole, it's not like I was on the ground, so why should I have an issue if I'm pretty much safe in my cockpit flying around? So I did my best to ignore it and pretend like it didn't exist, which it's really not good for anybody. But how I get past everything now is I do my best. Like my husband knows what I experienced. P.S. He was that boyfriend that I called that day. He's actually my husband now. So he's probably one of the best guys ever. Not without his flaws. We all have our flaws, right?
He was young.
But he knows everything. And part of my healing again is being able to talk to other people who may be feeling those same things or may be feeling depression or stuff, because I as much as I tried to hide it, and I have gotten counseling in the past that if somebody wants to talk to me and I can help them and share my story, even on a one-on-one,
yeah.
I'm happy to do that, because at this point, I don't want people to suffer, more than they have to, more than it's just not good, because it can lead to worse things. And, if I can do anything to help somebody not feel some of the things that I have felt or gone through those things, or at a minimum to let them know that they're not alone in their feeling, that's always huge, is to know that you are not alone in how you feel. As dumb as you think that, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way because of X, Y, and Z, you know what? But you do feel that way. So embrace that fact. Don't try to wish it away as soon as possible. Embrace it and understand that it's okay that you feel that way. And that it will probably take some time to get over and recover from. So,
well, you're a living witness to that. You're a living testimony to that. And I think when people hear you tell your story, they can hear the passion in your voice and in your heart that you want to be that beacon of hope to people, right? And when people see that more of you and they hear your story and they feel that passion and that fire in you to be that sounding board for people, to let them know that it's okay to not be okay and you're going to get through this. I got through it. I mean, when people hear that and they see it, then they start to believe it. But when you're in that moment, when you're in that pit and you have no one, that's when the trouble starts, right?
Right.
And so we just got to make sure that, you know, anybody we touch, when we're out here talking and speaking and connecting and networking, that we always have that in the back of our minds. Not everybody's as strong as us. Not
Right.
everybody feel like they can get past certain things. And when they don't feel like they can get past it, we need to be able to let them know that there's help out there and that if we can do it, they can do it as well. So I appreciate your story. I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your being such a motivation to me and to all of the viewers here that may be suffering in shame and in silence and knowing that they don't have to. They really don't.
That's right. You don't have to. And at the same time, there are different levels of healed and healing. And so don't feel also like if you can't talk about it, then you're not okay. So not everybody's going to talk about their MST or their PTSD, and that's okay. The more I share this story, you know, some people will come up to me privately and say, it happened to me too. And they're public speakers, but they don't speak on it. And that's okay. Like, please don't put yourself in that, you know, extra pain if that's not what you're called to do. Just listen to the calling, and, you know, maybe in 10 years you might speak about it. But right now that is not serving you to talk about that. And that's super important too in the healing process.
Yeah. And we all got to be there for one another. I mean, and again, it's no different than your friends. I mean, because of the situation and the complexity of that situation, maybe they didn't know what to say to you in that moment, right? But I think if we just take a step back and we just breathe and just be there, even just to listen to the victim, just to be able to listen and say, let me hold your hand, I'll cry with you, and we'll figure this out together. But do not make the victim feel ashamed or feel alone. I think that we're doing these veterans a disservice if that happens. And so now is the time in the show that we're going to do a rapid fire. This conversation has been really, really deep. And now I want to send you some rapid fire little comments, and I want you to complete the statements to see where your mind is at and see what you're thinking about, okay? And
that's
so,
dangerous. You're dangerous.
Stop it. But I'm sure you're up for it. I mean, your story
okay, I'm ready.
Is powerful. I'm sure you're going to be able to just continue to enlighten our viewers with your quick fire responses. Okay, you ready? Okay.
Ready.
The first one is, if I had a do-over in life, it would be?
It would be to ask more questions and not be afraid to look stupid, but to ask the questions and basically to give less fucks about what other people think of you. So ask more questions, care less about what people think of you. And yeah.
The day I will never forget is?
Oh, there's so many.
Just one.
This one. My son's birth. It was 42 hours of labor, 3 hours of pushing, at home, no drugs. Whoa. I will never forget that.
You're a strong woman.
Ever.
You are a strong woman. The constant thing in my life is?
So that changes all the time, but the constant thing in my life right now is my family. My husband, my kids, they are my world, my everything. I can depend on him for everything, whether it's emotional support. He's got my back. He encourages me whenever I have some crazy idea. It's my family.
My truth comes from?
My truth comes from my heart. I feel like I lead more with my heart than anything else, which is something that took me a long time to acknowledge because, you know, in the military, there's no emotion, no feelings. But that's not how I am. I am a very loving person. As tough as I like to portray myself, I would rather love you than fight you. And so I believe that's where my truth comes from.
Last one. My life is worth.
My life is worth as much as yours, as much as everyone else. I believe everyone's life is worth the same. We're all humans. There is no one life that is worth more than somebody else's. And that is something that we need to cherish.
Awesome. Your story's been so inspiring. That's why I wanted you at the table. I mean, I just know viewers are going to be so inspired by you, Vanessa. I mean, I read your bio. I knew I was going to get a little something, but I didn't know how much something you were going to give me here today. And I just appreciate your honesty. Right now, we need this. I mean, I'm sure everyone's been listening and watching the news and seeing what's happening at Fort Hood. And my heart goes out to survivors of military sexual trauma, those who are suffering in silence, those who are still trying to find their way. And we don't know who they are, but I want to just say to them, just know that you're not alone in this. Vanessa is a prime example that you can survive from it. You can move past it. You can live your best life past it. Don't let anyone or anything take your power, even if you had this happen to you. And so, Vanessa, with that being said, again, thank you so much for being here today. I want you to now look into the camera and speak to any particular woman veteran that may be suffering, having a story like yours, similar to yours, may not have had an incident yet. But what would you tell that female veteran? What would be your message? And that would be our closing message.
Never be afraid to stand up for yourself. You can be your own hero. You are stronger than you think you are. I don't care that you feel weak mentally or physically. You are strong enough.
And you are enough.
That's right. You are enough.
You are enough. Okay. Are you doing any conferences, speaking engagements? Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at The Siren Strong on Instagram.
Okay.
I have my own website. It's www.sirenstrong.com. I'm also on the Athena's Voice USA website as a speaker for them. I'm on LinkedIn, Vanessa Siren Mahan.
That's how I found.
And I shall be speaking at the SHRM Conference on Inclusion in October in Philly. Nice. So come by and see me.
Will do. Thank you again so much. Thank you all for being here today to watch Who's at the Table. Thanks for supporting us and supporting this platform to have women veterans tell their stories and tell you why we are worthy to be at the table. God bless you all. Be safe out here in COVID-19. Thanks for supporting the show, and we'll see you next time.